Okay, after we get our center plank on, it's glued in, it's nice and straight. Our next step is this chine rail. And this is what's going to fit in that little notch that we had cut out of the rib. Now this is where your saran wrap on the roll is really going to come in handy. You can use a lot of clamps if you want. I use a combination of the saran wrap on the roll with clamps. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to rip down one of your planks to a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch square. And that's what's going to give you this chine rail. And you're just going to slowly start clamping this thing, this rail in, together. And I'll show you a little trick here with the saran wrap. When you have the saran wrap in, it gives it like a little spring edge. So you can pull it out of the way, drop some glue up in there, and then it'll pull it right back tight again. Okay, we'll get a little close up of these things. So you're going to get this thing all formed up, clamped in. You're going to use the saran wrap. Okay. So here's the saran wrap on a roll. Right? Get a piece about 2 foot long, pull it, and you stretch it out. And what we would do here to hold this one in place, so I'm going to pass it under, and you can do this any way that works for you. So I'm going to do this one. I'm going to pass it under, over, and that's going to give me some upward lift on this rail. Okay. Go up underneath. Right, so I'm crisscrossed on that edge. Get it in fairly close, but don't overlap it. Crisscross it back over. Essentially, we're just securing this thing down. And give it a nice little wrap. Right? And then that way I can stretch this thing out to where I want it. I'll give you a little close up here of what I've done. Okay. And that holds that chine rail in. Now if your notch is a little big, you can actually slide a couple toothpicks back underneath to push this out. But with this saran wrap, we'll be able to push this down, get some glue up underneath this edge right there, and then it'll hold it right in place for us. So you're going to do that on every one of these. This one, this one. I've got a clamp on this one just because I'm getting a little bow pressure here. If you notice the tail here, I don't have a notch on the tail. So what I've done is I've pulled it in, pulled this rail, this chine rail in, and I've pulled this little tail stringer, this little tail rib to that, and I've got it tightened up right here. So when I want to glue, I can just pull it out, put some glue in, put it right where it needs to go, and then let it set up. You can see here on the front that I've got a piece of the saran wrap pulling this front edge in. The reason I pull this in is it gives it that nice radius that I need. If this was out where it naturally wants to be, that line's going to be too straight. So we want this radius to actually start back here, bow it out by pulling this in. Now, don't worry about where the front's going to glue off. What's going to happen later is we're going to put in a nose block on this thing. But just pull that in so it has a nice radius. Like I say, and then we're going to go and we're going to glue up every one of these. Okay, as you can see, everything is glued up. Got the tail glued up. All right, what we've done here is we've glued off our chine rail. That's the one that fits inside the notch. And then we've come back over top of that, right over top of that, flush to the bottom of the chine rail with another 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch strip. And we've clamped that. Now don't laugh at all my clamps. They say it doesn't matter what kind of clamps you use, but I've got 20 different types of clamps that I've used on this just to hold that in, to hold that form. So I've glued the inside of that and clamped these two together. And that's our first rail band on the bottom, and then we're going to add another one right on top of that. All right. So this is set up. It's glued, set up. Okay, our next step here is we're going to put this next rail band on, okay? And this is where our thumb planer is going to come in handy, all right? Now what you'll want to do is you want to kind of get this thing on the edges, set up where it will be tight on the edges. You want to use a pencil or a pen and kind of mark off where your rails are going to be, where your ribs are going to be on this thing. Just as like a reference point, okay? So that's a good starting point. I'm going to go ahead and mark that one here. Mark that one here. Mark that one here. That one here. Here, just so you don't lose your place on these. You can see on this rail, this second board lies nice and flat to the first one we put on. So, that's gonna clamp down really good. So does that one. No work needed there. That one's okay. That one's okay. That one's okay, but we're starting to get a little bit of a roll here. So we're going to mark the inside edge on this. And these things start rolling off. And as they roll, what we're going to want to do, since we have that marked edge, right? We've marked that right there. What we're going to want to do is we're going to use our hand planer and just nice and gently, we're going to knock this edge off just along the bottom, right? Just start taking a little bit of wood off, right? And what that's going to do is that's going to allow us, right? We're going to take this bottom edge off right here, just like this, at a nice easy angle. And we're going to feather that back. And we're going to start with a little bit. We're going to be patient. We're just going to start knocking this edge off. Right? And that will allow it to kind of roll a little bit more and set down tighter on this bottom rail. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then I'll give you a close-up once we get done. Now if you look here, you can see right there where I've beveled that edge. Right? I've beveled that edge with that hand planer. You can also do it with the orbital sander. It works really good. Right? And that gives me a fairly tight joint right here. I don't want that crack there too big. That allows this board to roll up the edge. All right, our next step after we get our boards laid up, and we, like I say, we get these things kind of planed down so they roll around this edge as good as possible. And we get them up to where they're about even with the nice flat surface on this rib. So right here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 ribs is what I've glued on. Once we get to that point, we're going to get our hand planer and we're going to plane off a nice smooth flat edge. It's not going to be level, it's going to be kind of at this direction from this edge to this edge. And then we're going to plane that off nice and smooth. So we got about, a 1/4 inch flat surface that our top plank is going to lay on, that we have something to glue to. Right? So we're going to flatten this off. I say it's not going to be flat per se, it's going to be at an angle. So when our top board gets put on, let me find a little board here. So if this edge plank came and we clamp that down right there, it has a nice flat surface. Instead of a point, you got something to glue to. So that thing will glue to this edge here as much as possible and to this edge. I say, and then when we go to put that side board on, we'll clamp that. Now remember, we're going to come back and we're going to knock all these edges down, but we want to get as close to this radius as possible. Right? You see how that, with that flat edge there, it's right here, we're still a little high. Right? So we're going to kind of flatten that off just a little bit more. Right? A little high here. Alright, so if we had a board that came up to the edge, look at that, that's nice there. Nice and stable. So we got plenty of surface inside of here, underneath on this rib. Same thing here. Plenty of surface on this rib to glue to, and then we got a nice flat surface on this edge. We're going to do that along the whole rail edge of the board. So as these planks continue to line up, we have surface to glue to. Like if this board ended here, we want to be able to glue to that surface. Another thing we'll take a look at is as we put these top rails on, they're not going to run all the way out to the edge, because if we ran this one all the way out to the edge, we'd be sticking way up above where we need to be. So we're just going to bring that out, to about here, to where it's a little higher than this. And then when we go with our planer, we're going to knock this down and continue to knock it down with the planer right through here as we continue to knock this one down. That one's going to continue to plane off to nothing. This one's going to continue to plane off down to nothing, and that'll give us our edge. So as you can see, we've planed the rail edges off completely, all the way around, nice and smooth. You can see where they've run out, and then I've just run right into the next rib, next lower rail band. Right, once we get everything planed out, smooth, we repeat the process, the entire rail process on the other side. Once we get the other rail built up, then we'll go on and plank the top of the board. So as you can see here, the left rail is done. We still need to continue on the right side rail, and then we'll plank it off.